All right, so good day to everyone. Thank you very much for joining for this session today. And despite your time changes, I'm very glad to have all of you here for the meeting today. We are here for the virtual session on Polar Connect, Strengthening Digital Autonomy. And let me introduce our speaker. He's Valter Nordh. He's the CEO of NORDUnet. Without taking much time, I would like to open the floor for the CEO of NORDUnet, Valter Nordh, to continue the session. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you very much. Hope the sound is coming through well.
Yes,
very happy
good.
to be here and talk about Polar Connect. Looking forward to the next APAN meeting, where we also will be present, participate, and take more discussions in the meeting. So, without further ado, let's go into the presentation. Polar Connect, a new digital route between Europe and East Asia across the Arctic. It's a dream that has been in the making for a long time. The distance between Europe and Asia, it shrinks, becomes much shorter if we think about going over the Arctic. I will go through in the presentation some of the benefits for this route. I'll talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we are facing, how we are addressing them, and also trying to look a little bit about the benefits for the larger internet at scale. So, quickly, for those that are unfamiliar with NORDUnet, we are a organization. We were founded we were coming from project in the 1980s, quite old organization. We have been established as a legal organization since 1993. We are working together. We are part of the 5 Nordic NRENs. So we have CSC from Finland. We have SUNET from Sweden. We have DIKE from Denmark, SICT from Norway, and RHNet from Iceland. We are all working together in supporting the research and education in the Nordics, the respective NRENs in their countries, and NORDUnet on the international arena and coordinating efforts towards the world around us. We have a network. I'm sure that we have all seen and heard of GEONT, and we'll come to them in a minute. So the NORDUnet Network is consisting of interconnecting all the Nordic countries together. And we have also asked from our constituency, the researchers in the Nordics, to connect directly to some points in Europe, which includes Geneva for CERN, Amsterdam, Frankfurt, Hamburg, London for exchange of traffic. But also we have been asked to connect directly to North America. We have a direct connection to Montreal together with SURF and together with Canary from Canada. And we're also part of the AER consortium in connections to Singapore. Now, these are all good and connections are needed, but what we are looking for and what we are looking forward to is to have a direct connection from the Nordics to East Asia. That would be very, very open up a lot of new possibilities for Europe. As I mentioned, GEONT, we have been working together with GEONT for a long time. We are part of GEONT and the GEONT network. So we should say that the NORDUnet is the northern part of the European network, and GEONT is taking care of Europe as a whole. Arctic connectivity. We are seeing an increasing demand for redundant connectivity. We are also, unfortunately, aware of the sovereignty and the security risks. And the resilience is something that is being asked for to a larger extent when it comes to Polar Connect and when it comes to connectivity, or why we are trying to move into connectivity over the Arctics. At the moment, about 90% of the traffic between Europe and Asia traverses a very narrow area in the Suez Canal. And unfortunately, as we have seen recently, there was a ship that sank in the Suez Canal. And when it sank, there were 4 cables were damaged, and to our knowledge, they are still not repaired. They are still awaiting that the conditions for the repair cable ships will stabilize, that they can go in. We had the big tanker that was blocking the Suez Canal for some time. And again, with all those uncertainties, the connectivity between the whole region of Europe and Asia it would be valuable to have alternatives. So the geopolitical support for this has also been quite strong. We have had ministerial meetings. We've had a EU-Japan Digital Partnership Council. The connectivity and the cables have been mentioned and discussed at the pre-G7 meetings and in various other forums. So what are the options if we are dependent on today when it comes to connectivity? We have the option of going across Russia, and that's unfortunately is perspective an option that is no longer available to Europe. We have the Suez route, which is, as I mentioned, one challenging, that has its challenges. And the other option is going over North America. And that, again, it's a good option, but it increases the latency and takes a lot longer time. So looking at the map, and when we look at the map from the North Pole, with the North Pole in the center, it highlights a little bit how short the connection is between Europe and Asia going over the Arctics. So there are 2 initiatives at the moment when it comes to Arctic connectivity: Far North Fiber, which is a project that started before Polar Connect initiative started, and the Polar Connect initiative, which NORDUnet and the Nordic Entrance is moving and pushing for. The Far North Fiber is a longer route that would require less icebreakers in building it. The Polar Connect route, and we'll get back to the icebreaker topic because that's a very important question when it comes to Arctic connectivity. The Polar Connect, the green route, requires more icebreaker capabilities, but it is a much shorter route. The Polar Connect route is in the order of 10,000 kilometers, while the Far North Fiber is in the order of 16,000 kilometers. A Polar Connect, Arctic connectivity. We can say Arctic connectivity will also include and give connectivity to the whole APEN region, to all stakeholders in the East Asia, Southeast Asia. There is already good and existing connections from Japan to other regions of the Southeast Asia, and all those connections can benefit and take advantage when and if there is a need for traffic going to Europe. It also creates new scientific collaborations. I'm very happy to learn about that in Europe, there is a research program, the Horizon Europe program. And in the Horizon Europe program, there are now, if my memory serves me, Canada is a member, South Korea is, New Zealand is, and if I recall correctly, Japan started the formal negotiations in the end of November and expect to conclude negotiations in about 6 months. So going to actually put a cable in the North Pole, and how do we do that? So last 2 years ago now, time goes quicker. 2 years ago, we started a desktop study, and the desktop study was looking at what are the possibilities, what are the possible routes that we can go to when it comes to going through the North Pole. And the desktop study showed that the two options on this map that's called R2, the R2 options are the better options when it comes to the depth of the sea, under the depth of the sea under the ice, there's a difficult English word, bathymetry. Basically how the geography of the sea bottom looks like. And the recommendation that we have at the moment is to use the route R2. That will go from Svalbard, which is in the to the right side of the picture, and more or less going straight across the North Pole, and then going to Bering Strait, Alaska, and then down to Japan. What is fascinating when it comes to Arctic connectivity, the Arctic Ocean, and the capability of working in the Arctics is that there is a long history of research expeditions going to the Arctic. So on this picture, we see the expeditions that have been carried out since 1991. And they have mostly been carried out by the Swedish research vessel called Oden, which is an icebreaker, almost capable of operating by itself in the Arctics. And if we recall the previous picture, and if we go back to one here, we remember the stretch going from Svalbard to Bering Strait. And on the same map here, going from Svalbard to Bering Strait up north, there are a lot of paths in this one, a yellow one. And the yellow paths here are interesting. The yellow paths are done when the ship has been equipped with something called a multi-beam. And the multi-beam has, when it has been doing the scientific surveys, they are taking, you can call it sort of a radar scanning of the bottom of the sea. So there is already a lot of knowledge how the bottom of the sea looks like. So going back to when we order and when you build a submarine cable, it's normally done in a couple of different phases. And some of those phases are, you have a desktop study where you look at the existing data that you have. And at some point later, you do actual surveys where you send out a ship, and the ship makes a sort of a radar picture of the bottom of the sea. Then when all looks good, you order a cable, and the cable is manufactured uniquely per project, and it's manufactured according to the shape of the terrain of the bottom of the sea for that specific cable. So we'll get back to the timeline when we are looking at implementing and working with this. So how are you actually going to deploy a submarine cable? So on the right here, on the upper right picture, we see Oden, which is that vessel that has been going to the Arctics 29 times, I think we counted earlier. And it is the Swedish Polar Research Secretariat that is responsible for coordinating the Oden icebreaker vessels to the Arctics. Sweden has a long tradition in working in the Arctics and has been for many years inviting other nations to come to the research operations going to the Arctics. And and hence also have learned and accumulated a lot of scientific knowledge. What you do with putting a cable in the Arctic is on the left side, there is an image of 3 ships. So the first ship is a icebreaker that is even stronger than Uden, and that is a Russian icebreaker. I think this picture is from 2003 or 2004, where they went to the North Pole and they brought a 3rd ship, which is the last ship on this picture, which is a drilling ship. But that drilling ship might as well be a cable laying ship. So the first icebreaker opens up the path. The second icebreaker clears out and breaks up the smaller ice pieces. And then you have a 3rd ship that is a support vessel that can then go basically anywhere in the Arctic. And there is also a new icebreaker that is being planned by the Swedish state. Swedish Polar Research Secretariat are working on developing a new icebreaker, and that icebreaker is going to have repair capabilities. So it will be a ship that is already from the beginning designed to be able to go and to both support the laying of the cable, but also in case of a need for repairing the cable. Sensors. So being a part of the NREN and the NREN community, and there have been a lot of interest from researchers in various aspects in getting access to smart cables. Smart cables are cables where you can get information from the sensors immediately. You can get informations on temperature, you can get informations on salinity, you can get information on the water pressure. And a lot of these things is information that the researchers today, they get by going out with a research vessel. Then they deploy a sensor and they leave it, and it's battery operated, and leave it there for some weeks, months, maybe a year, and then they come back and pick it up. Now, for those researchers, if they can get access to this information instantaneously, and the newer submarine cables have these capabilities that you can add sensing capabilities, various sensing capabilities to the submarine cables. This is something that the researchers are extremely excited about. They value having access to the research data where they can, for example, when it comes to climate change, they can quicker confirm whether their models are correct or whether their models needs adjustments. And now, when they have a model, then they are waiting for 6 months or up to 1 year before they can get the data back from their sensors. So an important aspect, but this is an addition to the cable apart from the connectivity that we are working on. We have had a workshop with a lot of researchers. And again, the interest and what they were asking for far exceeds what we are able to at the moment provide. So it's an ongoing and continuous discussion. And if you are aware of communities or areas that could benefit from having information from the Arctic, please reach out to us, and we're happy to convey contacts and set people up with those. So some of the benefits of Polar Connect, and then looking at it from a, if you call it more commercial or connectivity perspective, shortest path. If there's anything that is good to remember when it comes to Polar Connect and thinking about connectivity between Europe and Asia, shortest path. The deployment is something that has been done and operationalized a number of times. 29 times there have been journeys into the Arctic, into the North Pole. So the Swedish Polar Research Secretariat have a long track record and long experience of working in that environment. Something else, seismologically, it's sound and stable. There is very little earthquakes in the Arctic. Earthquakes could potentially disrupt or damage the cable when it is, well, once it has been there. But the fourth item I find quite, you could call it interesting and sometimes counterintuitive. That thanks to the Arctic ice, the cable itself is extremely well protected. So first of all, it is, well, varying the various depth, but it's about 4,000 meters of water in the North Pole. There are no fishermen, there are no fishes, there are no, if we would call it natural dangers to a submarine cable that is laying down at that depth. So it is also protected by that there is ice on top of the North Pole. We are expecting the route to be extremely stable and very little changes. The last bullet item here, the cable maintenance, however, is if there is something that happens and you could, in theory, have some errors on the cable. It could be a repeater that don't work. It could be something else where you actually need to go to the cable. It's very uncommon, but still it happens. If it happens, again, going back to this ship, and that has already been designed with the intention of going to be able to repair a cable in the Arctics. And something that I learned in working with regards to this project, the ice in the Arctics, I had this imagination that it was 2 kilometers thick, 3 kilometers thick, that it was amazing ice. It is on average between 2 to 4 meters thick in the Arctic, the ice. So in the Arctic, in the Arctic Ocean, the ice is no more than 2 to 4 meters thick. What happens in the summer and the winter, the ice don't get much thicker, but the area of the ice grows in the winter, and then it gets smaller in the summer. And that means that we also have the capabilities already today to completely work and be operating in the Arctics all around the year. We are planning to use the summer to put the cable in because, again, it's less ice, and unfortunately the icebreakers, they need a lot of fuel to work in the winter. They need more fuel because, again, they need to break more ice. But the capabilities of working in the Arctics is already there all around the year. More benefits. Digital resilience. Again, Europe and Asia. If I paint this map of Europe and Asia, and I paint it with latency in between, this will move the islands of Southeast Asia and Europe much, much closer together. We have a concept that we like to call digital gravity north, and data centers. There are a lot of data centers in the northern part of the Nordics that are being constructed. I know in Hokkaido, there in Japan, there is an interest in creating data centers. All those data centers are located close to where you have easy access to environmental, sustainable energy. But they do need a lot of network connectivity to become hubs for on the internet. And that is where we believe that connecting Southeast Asia, East Asia to Europe directly with a cable over the Arctic is tremendously going to add a lot of value. And I mentioned optional sensors, smart. Again, where you have the sensors, how and when you put them in, what they measure, it's always something where the national authorities needs to be involved. We are completely aware of that there's a multiple use for those sensors, but a lot of research would benefit tremendously if we are able to put some sensors in place. A quick look at the timeline for when we are aiming to try to finalize this. So we are now in 2025, and we have contracted seabed surveys for bathymetric data. Apologies for the pronunciation. Again, that's looking at how the sea bottom looks like. And those are starting in the summer of 2025 and will run summer until 2027, and they are funded. It is a joint project between NORDUnet, the Swedish Polar Research Institute, Secretariat, apologies, and NORDUnet. And they are already running. Then we are awaiting a new icebreaker, awaiting a formal decision, and then a construction. And once the new icebreaker is operational, we'll make a last full survey of the route and are expecting that we can have a cable in place around 2030. Looking forward to come to APAN 59 in Yokohama. It's only a few weeks away. Again, we'll be there. Feel free to reach out and talk to us, ask us any questions, and come with new ideas. Again, because new ideas might be something that's what we are looking for. We have more information. We have a white paper and what we call Vision 2030, which is a document describing the strategic and long-term vision for Arctic connectivity. Again, we believe that Arctic connectivity is plural. If we look at this in 10 years' time or in 15 years' time, we hope and we believe that the Arctic route will be used for much more submarine cables. That was the end of my presentation. So I'll stop sharing and I can go back to the pictures if there are any questions on the pictures. Thoughts, comments?
Questions, yeah. Douglas, please.
Thank you for that. I went to TNC in Estonia in 2019, and Eric Jan organized an off-site meeting where we went along to discuss it as a new thing. So it's great to see that it's got to this particular point. Obviously, it's going to be sounds like about a 10 or 11 year process from start to finish. I was interested in just one of my questions, which you partly answered, was what's the thickness of the ice that you have to break through? Again, like you, I wasn't sure whether it was, a kilometer of ice or, a few meters. So does that mean basically that if you take the North Pole route, that the icebreaker will be able to go through there without any problems and therefore lay the path for if that's the chosen route for the cable laying ship? And then in the winter that will sort of close up again. Is that the general gist of it?
Absolutely. Very short answer. And
yes.
The longer answer is I was worried that if you take an icebreaker and if you go on the green route and then you basically, would that mean that you would split the North Pole in two and it will float away from each other and then,
Sure.
But they told me that no, the ice is healed or completely back again after about 2 weeks.
Right. Okay.
And the time distance that we are talking about when we go from the North Pole, from the beginning of the ice to the other side, is approximately 41 days. So it's in the order of 40 days when it's the summertime, going from, you call it with an icebreaker and a cable laying ship. That's the time crossing the North Pole. And then on top of this comes the time of going from Bering Strait to Japan. But again,
and presumably with a warming climate, that the thickness of the ice or the time that the ice is there is diminishing every 5 years. I mean, I've seen statistics to look at the last 30 or 40 years. The number of days that ships can sail through there, I think, is increasing compared to where it was maybe in the 1950s or 60s.
It has increased tremendously, and I know that Russia is looking at opening up the side close to Russia during the summer months for transportation ships. So it is, unfortunately. Now, you mentioned something, Douglas, and I had that also. The thickness of the ice when the climate gets warmer is basically constant, but the area, that's what is changing. That's what we learned. But I also thought that it would become, if you call it, thinner, but it's mostly the area that is affected, that it just becomes less ice to traverse.
Thank you.
Welcome. Other thoughts, comments, reflections?
So, Otto, you mentioned about the terrain, and then you you design the cable around it. So is it the same case with other places, or is it specific for this route?
Though that is the case in general for submarine cables, that you
Right.
do first a survey and then you predict where. And one of the reasons is also that I will try to make sure to bring to Japan a sample of an actual submarine cable. So a submarine cable varies from basically the thickness of my thumb. About 1 inch is a thickness of a submarine cable with as many pairs as you want in it, when it doesn't need to be protected. Then it is, if you would call it the thinner part of the cable. But when it comes to areas where you have more bends, and again, that comes back to the geometry of the sea, you have more bends, you have possibility of the cable moving. You come to areas where you possibly have fishing ships, and you get closer to the shores, to the beaches. And Douglas, you mentioned earlier, when you come to, for example, if you go to Antarctica, that will be a huge challenge in that you potentially have icebergs that are then scraping, etc. And then the thickness of the cable can be 4 inches, can be 10 centimeters in diameter. So this is why it's important that you make the cable per projects. And there are 4 manufacturers of cables in the world: UEI from China, Subcom from United States, NEC from Japan, and Alcatel from Europe. So it's one of these 4 that are manufacturing most of the submarine cables in the world.
And just another question, if I may, Walter. Given that the topical thing at the moment is the problem or the challenge that cables in your part of the world are having with ships of unknown origin.
Anchors.
Has that been, I mean, that's something that's relatively new. I mean, obviously we've faced, natural hazard type problems like you say, icebergs or earthquakes. Now we've got human interaction. Is that having some effect on your planning for this particular route?
So both yes and no. And I think the no comes from that the route has been planned and thought of for quite some time. Unfortunately, Douglas, there has been human influence on submarine cables in various instances for quite a long time. And I think what we have seen in the Baltics has just been a little bit of an eye-opener for a lot of politicians, how vulnerable we as a society are. I had some informal discussions with Finland, and so Finland has been quite affected by some of these recent cuts. And I think that the calculations was that, if I remember correctly, they're quite dependent on, they have options for submarine cables for connectivity. They can go out from the northern part of Sweden. So there are possibilities for Finland to still be connected. But I think if there are 5 submarine cables being cut, you would feel it, you would notice it. And I think recently we've seen 3 cables that have been cut or damaged. Some of them have been repaired already, but it is not an enormous amount of cables. If we look at telegeography that has the submarine cables of all the world, you are talking about 400, 500 cables in the whole world. So if you do want to damage the internet, unfortunately, you have a lot of possibility to damage the internet. And our beliefs is that it's impossible to have a patrol ship continuously going over the cable all the time. It is resilience. And another part is that you can also use the sensing to be aware of when you have ships coming closer to your. It is a fascinating topic, sensing in itself. Happy to dive into that at a different one. The short version is that up to a distance of about 150 kilometers from the shore, or from a place where you have something called a DAS sensor, you can use the cable as a super sensitive microphone that is picking up all sorts of sound and movement. We have an example of an engineer here in NORDUnet who took a spool of fiber, he took a radio, and he played Another One Bites the Dust from Queen. Then he recorded that music using this sensing technology. It was amazing. You heard everything in the song, you heard all the things. So all these things that if you need to spy on people, you don't need to put in microphones anymore. You have them already in the walls. Just, get a tap into the fiber, and then you're good to go. Again, different topic, but it gives you the possibility to know when something might happen to the cable. You definitely would hear if an anchor is being dragged towards the cable. And the good thing with this is that it's fairly real time. So you can also hear and know these things in real time. But again,
I seem to remember from Eric Jan's session in Estonia that they were the sensors were picking up whales talking. I seem to recall that, which was a very interesting one at the time, that the idea of these whales conversing could be picked up in the same way. So
yeah. More common thoughts.
Anything more? Right. So looks like no. So maybe we should then wind up. So in fact, like just for everyone's information, NORDUnet, Walter, we wanted to have a session at APAN 59, and therefore this is like a precursor where we'll do an intro and more discussions to follow at APAN 59. So I'll share this with everyone who is going to participate in 59 so that they'll start somewhere and they'll come with more ideas, questions, and so that we can have a more fruitful discussion there in person. Looking forward to seeing all of you there at APAN 59. And thank you very much for joining today. And yeah, we'll close it. And thank you all for doing it's wonderful and interesting. Right? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
thank you. See you
Thank
in
you,
Japan.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you in Japan.
you.